Let's do it, man. Igor, it is a pleasure to have you here. And for everyone that does not know Igor, he's a data engineer at Adyen. Correct me if I'm not pronouncing that right.
No one knows how to pronounce correctly, especially from expats. So, because I've heard a lot of versions from Odien to Adyen to like something like this. But let's stick to Adyen.
Adyen, there we go. And what happened is that I somehow came across something that you were doing. And if anyone wants to go to Igor's profile on LinkedIn, I'll throw it in the chat right now. You just radiate MLOps from your profile. I don't know how you do it, but instantly when I saw your profile on LinkedIn, I was like, dang, this guy seems like he's got some knowledge. We should probably get him on a meetup. And I think I reached out, and shortly thereafter, you were like, sure, give me a little bit of time, but I'll do something.
Yeah, I've tried my best, man, because I mean, not every day person whom I wanted to reach out like comes to me by himself, like because I wanted to reach out to you, like, hey, Dimitrius, maybe we can speak about something. Like, I'm like, wow, I was thinking about this, and here's here.
That's awesome. Yeah, so it's pretty incredible what you're doing. I think we should probably get a bit of background info before we even start on the topic of today, which is a philosophical topic of how to avoid suffering when it comes to MLOps and data ops and data engineering and machine learning engineering. That's the long title. The short title is just how to avoid suffering. And I would love to know how exactly you got into tech and what was your journey like to becoming a data engineer?
It's a very complicated journey and complicated story because first time when I got into tech, it was mid-90s, I guess. I was a small kid and I was playing on my mother's PC at her institute in game like Prince Persia. I still remember that game. It's awesome. And basically, all my childhood, it was with the old books like Basic for Children, something like this, like Turbo Pascal, etc. But to be serious, I've started the programming when I was learning bioinformatics because my background is not computer science. I was doing for a very long time, like my master's and something on my bachelor studies. I was doing bioinformatics, like genome assemblies, genome annotations, etc. And there I needed to learn something. I mean, because by hand, like you cannot do, like you cannot predict, you cannot model anything, like just like with your, I don't know, like with your imagination you can, but you need to provide some results. And there I've started to work with such ecosystem, like statistical ecosystem like R. I mean, that's awesome tool, man, like for statistical programming, for visualizations, etc. And I mean, this very awesome package like bioconductor. But afterwards, I felt that R, like, it's awesome, but it's super black boxy. So it is black box. It has some methods implemented, and yeah, you can use them. You can, to some extent, even extend them, but it's not super flexible. So already my PhD thesis I was trying to do with Python. There, like it was, I guess, 2010 or 2000. Somewhere there, like 2010. I mean, but PhD thesis I didn't finish, so I'm happy me, I didn't finish it. So yeah, I've realized too soon that for doing PhD you need to be super romantic person, because I mean because it does not give you super big values of except like some romanticism and like thinking about that you're contributing a lot of into science, especially in that like experimentation, biology, science, etc. Very conservative one.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, at 2000, after I've dropped my PhD studies, I've started doing, I've started programming basically.
Oh, nice.
I don't know how it happened, but at that time I mean, I always I had title like backend engineer, like, and this is all, but almost all my career I was doing just I was working just with data. So even on my first project, we were writing like web analytic tool, like for making analysis of weblogs, etc. And even there, we did implement our own small NoSQL database. I mean, like it's super. Like I know that it's I would say it would be super allowed to say that it was NoSQL database, but yeah, it was persisting data in the way which we wanted. So basically, we've written it.
It's blasphemy on NoSQL databases.
Man, at that time, I didn't know almost anything. When I started writing it, I didn't know anything about how it should be working, etc. Because my background wasn't computer science. And like, wow, I need to write this. And like, okay, I need to read how it should be working, etc. What is WAL? Like, write ahead log, etc. Why does it need? Does it need ACID or does it not need ACID, etc. About this sharding, like all that stuff, I needed to learn at one time, basically, without having all the background in computer science. I would say it was super challenging and it was super hard.
Yeah, I believe you.
And after that, I just go on like with another projects. I did a lot of them in consultancies, but recently, last couple of years, before Adyen and before Adyen, inside Adyen, I'm working mostly like data engineer / MLOps. So I'm helping companies to tune their pipelines with machine learning models and with data.
Well, I know that you all at Adyen have a dedicated like MLOps team, and I want to get into that in a little bit, but you said something in this intro that I find fascinating, which is you had to learn a million things at once and figure out the best practices, right?
Yes.
Do you have any recommendations on how to best do that? Because it feels like we're very much in a state right now where a lot of people are coming into MLOps from different areas and they need to learn a million things because the ecosystem is so large and try to pick up some best practices along the way. So are there any tips that you learned in that section of your life that you could pass on?
Oh, a lot of tips. I mean, I also I was teaching Python programming after like this after learning everything by myself. I decided, okay, maybe I need to transfer my knowledge or all my tips to like friends of mine and to everyone who needs it. So, and I also was teaching programming, like Python programming, like for 2 years in a row. Like locally in Ukraine. Yeah, so tips. I mean, from that time, I have just one tip. If you need to build something, don't use huge frameworks when you don't understand how they do work. Try to understand everything from smaller pieces. And like for example, you have like in web development, you have industrial like ready frameworks, like for example in Python Django, where everything comes with it, and you have small web frameworks. So in my opinion, it's better to use small frameworks and to build everything by pieces, like with everything, like with routing, with authentication, etc., 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 and you will understand how does it work. Like after that, when you become old, lazy, or just lazy person, like you sure you can use everything what you want, but when you're learning, don't hesitate and to use small pieces and don't hesitate like to look inside how does it work, like because even when I was interviewing, so I wasn't looking at like tools with which person had experience. I was asking about about inside functionality of tools, how they are working, how person does understands does understand like Python language, or how person understand how data flow should look like inside. So that's my recommendation, like to work with small pieces and to look inside of them, like try to turn on your curiosity, basically, because you need to push yourself to dig inside of tools to understand how they do work, why they work like this, etc.
So if I can disseminate that for a moment, it seems like there's, on one hand, you took your knowledge and you tried to, I like how you said that, you tried to transfer it to others. And that, I've heard, is a great way of also solidifying what you know, because
Yeah.
you'll see where the holes are. And then on top of that, you were digging into these pieces that I really like how you say that. Don't start with the gigantic framework that does everything,
Yeah.
especially when you don't know how it works. Later, when you are an old hat, then you can get into it more and you can say, well, this is going to make my life significantly easier, so I'll do it then. But now, let me just figure out how these tools actually work and how they play together and what is underneath the abstraction layer so that I can become a better programmer. I can have a deeper understanding in case something does go wrong.
Yes, that's totally like 100% true. And especially with teaching others. I mean, first year when I was preparing lectures, I mean, like it was topic like which I knew by my heart. I mean, I was using it every day, etc. But every time when I was preparing lectures, I was thinking about how to explain this like use case, how to explain how does it work, and I was preparing, like I was spending one full day for 1 hour lecture. And every lecture I was getting I wouldn't say stupid, but question, but very simple question to which I didn't have correct answer. Man, at one time it was embarrassing. After that, I'm at one time it was embarrassing, but I learned like very fast that if I don't know something, it's better for me to say I don't know and to look to try to find how to explain it like next time or in our Slack, etc.
So a little bit off topic here, but
Sorry, guys.
nobody's given a shout out to your background, and I want to just mention that your background is classic, especially because I think a few weeks ago I put on LinkedIn or something. It was like, explain the MLOps ecosystem in a GIF, and somebody put that GIF of the house on fire, and it was like a meme, and it was like, everything's fine here, we're all good. And so that's the kind of confidence we all have in the MLOps ecosystem at the moment. Let's shift gears into what you're doing now with MLOps. And I I think it will be useful for us to get a bit of background on how your team is structured, what you all are doing, because I know you have a dedicated platform or a dedicated MLOps team, I think is what you call it. Can you dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, but maybe I will give you a bit more history here. So,
Yeah.
because at Adyen, we just started to have dedicated MLOps team just recently, like last couple months, I would say, like it was officially shaped, because before we had initiative like with people who were doing it. But we have this team inside of another big initiative, like which we call Center of Data Infrastructure, etc. So because we need to keep this team very close to infrastructure itself. So why it is? So maybe it's a bit of topic, but I mean, I want to explain how to avoid all this fire behind me, or how after a couple months say, okay, this is fine, this is just small fire, etc. So there is very nice talk from former head of data engineering at Slack. I don't remember his name right now, but it was about rise of data engineering, and he had this infinite loop of sadness when in four corners he has like business, data science, data engineering, and we can place here also MLOps and infrastructure, and every one of them is disconnected. especially when you have them like in their own domain silos, etc. And every one of them disconnected, like in communications, then you have mass, you have fire. You don't have this fire, you have huge fire, like dumpster fire. I really like his example with dumpster fire. So this is why when we were starting this initiative, like with data engineering and with MLOps, we were pushing to be close to infrastructure, and we were designing it with thinking of how to connect us with data scientists. Because in data engineering and with MLOps, you have a couple of stakeholders, and unfortunately, in very rare cases, you have stakeholder like a business. But in most cases, you have stakeholders, that's your data scientists, that's your clients, internal clients. And you need to have very close communication with them. Like, I don't know, like about every day, but every week you need to like catch up with them, like to share your experience. They need to share with you their pain because you need to solve the pain. So, and basically we have not big team, I would say. We have team of 5, and we compose a team of that bigger group of data infrastructure, like engineers, not like infrastructure engineers, but engineers who knew how our data infrastructure works, and also of data scientists, like technical one.
So take us through this evolution of what you've been working with in the past. And I know that you mentioned to me before, you rolled your own, right? And then eventually you got to a point like where you said, we need to transfer over to open source because it's mature enough. Or what does that look like? Can you give me a bit of background?
Yeah, so there is very nice blog post at Adyen Tech about our infrastructure, which we had, so you can Google it. So it was about our internal scheduling system. So I will try to find it and I will post in the chat. So it was describing that basically due to some constraints which we had previously, like 3 years ago, it was built in-house scheduling system, like with some look at Airflow and how it was working, but it was built homegrown, like with our own, I don't know, with our own bugs, etc. And it was supported just by one person. I mean, but it was doing its works. It worked, and that's why it was adopted. Why it happened? It happened because at some point, all the data initiative were, I don't know, were thought that it was just POC, like proof of concept. And it was huge mistake for the people who were working with it. Why? Because when you're trying to build a system which interconnected with different parts, let's say we have data engineering or machine learning engineering. Okay, let's dive into machine learning. You have system which connected with different parts. That's infrastructure, that's CI/CD pipelines, that's some artifactors, etc. So that's training system for machine learning models. You cannot start thinking about it like POC. You already need to have in your mind thoughts about that, how it should be working when it's production ready, or how it should be working in a year. I mean, I'm not saying about different parts, but I'm saying about constraints or requirements. Like, does it need to have high availability? Does it need to be fault tolerant? Redundancy, etc. So what load it should maintain. So and also, like, I'm here I'm just describing like technical parts, but huge problem also that when you start something and you roll out like some POC product to people who is hungry for doing analytics. Yes, so you're like, okay, here you are, POC product, do analytics. Like you can do like create features, create your models. They started working with it, and eventually you end up with something which widely adopted, with which people like already they learned how to work with it, and migration from that homegrown system or like POC like-minded to something very super production ready will be very painful because of the adopted practices. They wrote some code for like hacky code to cover some use cases, to cover some bugs, etc. So
that's a huge point right there. If you don't plan for production from the beginning, then it's going to be painful trying to go from POC to production. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And especially in data world, you need to forget about POC. Period. You need to think about products, and even when you're doing POC, it's need to cover all use cases which you need to have. And here I'm saying about technical use cases and also about use cases for end users. I mean, that's my opinion, personal. Maybe someone will not agree with me, but when you're working in data world, like and in machine learning world, forget about POC. POC can work on your laptop to check, oh, is it good for this environment on my laptop, and that's all. Or you want to check updates for new MLflow UI or whatever, but forget about that POC, like this abbreviator, like 3 letters POC in data and ML world. Yes.
Oh, I love that idea. That's a great quote too. So we've got some questions coming through the chat, and I will just take a moment to mention to everyone, feel free to throw questions in. This is all of us here, so I will get to them as they come. Ron is asking a question. Ron, I was trying to warm him up a little. I was going to get here, but I like how you dive into it and get right to the point. Ron does not like to beat around the bush. He says, what tech stack does your team use now, and how do you handle data lineage?
Oh, data lineage. Unfortunately, with data lineage, I cannot say a lot here. Why? Because something is under NDA. So, but about tech stack, for sure. So, because I mean, long story short, Adyen is the on-prem company, and that's why we constrained with some choices. But for our data world, we do use open source tools like HGP platform, like Horton Data Platform, Spark, and the Jupyter Hub installation. So that's for like processing data, for like ad hoc queries, etc. For orchestration and for controlling, like scheduling of machine learning models, like training of machine learning models, I guess we it's already industrial standard, but that's Airflow. I mean, that's not a secret. And for machine learning, like metadata storage or for tracking, I mean, it's very hard topic with me because we've started to use MLflow a long time ago when it was good. I mean, when we just was presented by Databricks. But with all our experience, which we have, that I can say that MLflow maybe it's good and super good on Databricks cloud, maybe, but for use case on when you have on-prem installation, when you need to support different like ACLs, like access release, like different role-based access control, like when you want to see visualization and metrics not based on run of every model, but on based of experiments, etc. I mean, that's not super nice too. You need to you need to add new functionality, but you like especially with UI, etc. I'm not complaining about API, but especially with UI, you were restricted because you already have ready compiled huge React application, and you super restricted with it. Like, I mean, I'm like from my point of view, it's not super nice for on-prem installations.
That's something that I've heard from a few other providers where it will get you 80% of the way there. And then if you want to add that extra 20, you're going to suffer.
Oh
So
yeah, definitely.
getting back to the how to avoid suffering, that is probably one. Choose wisely. But it seems like you chose back in the day and now you're regretting it.
I would say I'm regretting about it because just because personally me, I wasn't not thinking about all the use cases. If I were thinking about all use cases, I would have I would have made different choice. But at that point of time, first, I didn't want to reinvent wheel, honestly. So, and even now, so I will say that I'm going to, or we are going to ditch something. So it's better for me to work with officially supported or supported by community open source tool and try to enrich it somehow, like with our internal tools or with homegrown tools, etc. So, for example, MLflow has super nice and super rich API, which we still can use. We still can use it in different projects, in different aspects, etc. But yeah, so I would say how to avoid suffering. Don't start with reinventing wheels. Check experience, which, I mean, you're not the only one with this problem, especially in our role. We have a lot of companies which try to solve the same problem. So try to reach to the community and try to use tool which solves 80% of your use cases. And maybe 20%, with 20% you will be suffering, but that will not be like 100% suffering.
I like that. And if anybody else has any of those stories, let us know in the chat of using one tool and it gets you 80% of the way there. And then that last 20% was a bit of a headache. The next question we're getting from Karsten is your work constrained because your stakeholders are data scientists? Do you have to make compromises because of that? We've talked before about how it can be a pain to use notebooks. So would you force the data scientists to write Python scripts, or are there any other friction points?
Like here I have multiple answers. First, I don't feel myself constrained with having stakeholders as a data scientist, because data scientists I think that data scientists is my clients. Let's say, like, if I can have analogy like of consultancy and like consultancy business here, I would say that here I have my own startup in which I'm taking part in. So, and we have clients like the data scientists. So, and it's not constrained. So I need just to understand their pain and how to help solve their pain. And that's super nice, because personally, me, like MLOps engineer or data engineer, I don't know what to create. I mean, I can create platform, like, and I will say it's state-of-the-art platform. But if it doesn't solve the problem of data scientists who need to train model, to work, like to load model, to check metrics, to serve model, or whatever, like it will be a piece of shit. Sorry, guys. Yes.
Well, and so that begs the question, you must be working closely with the data scientists. How does that interaction happen?
Yeah. Except that we have like very except that we have channels like in MetaMost, that's analog of Slack, etc. But we have channels where we constantly flooding about everything, especially release related and code related. But also we have different alignment sessions with different, I would say, with different level of representativity. So we have alignment sessions with data scientists. Also, we like a short one, and it's just between team leads, etc. Also, we have alignment sessions for broader group where we share our progress. I mean, we share our progress, like data engineers, machine learning engineers, and they discuss their own topics. Sometimes it's super boring for me. Sometimes it's not. It is not. But yeah. So and this loop needs to be. We need to. Uh, we need to have this loop all the time, like open, and we need to communicate. Also, when I don't know how it happened, but it's super nice because when something is not working, data scientists data scientists are reaching directly to some engineers who is responsible for that feature or with whom they were speaking about like this feature, etc. And it's super nice because just after after release something broken and we were speaking on stand up like, yeah, I mean, we noticed that it's broken, maybe we need to fix it. Like, and colleague of mine says, yeah, so I already had the talk with data scientists, like, yeah, I know, I'm going to fix it. So I mean, that's super nice. I mean, just speaking. That's there is not there is no another answer.
Yeah, so that's really the close feedback loop or the short feedback loop. And then also I like what you said that there are I can't remember the name now. I had it in my mind.
Yeah.
But the different syncs that you have on the different levels. What did you call
Alignments.
it?
Yeah.
The alignment sessions.
Yeah.
That I think is huge too. That's very interesting to think about. So we've got another question coming through the chat from Daniel. Shout out to Daniel. He's saying Jack Hanlon, VP of Data at Reddit, had a great quote the other day where he talked about how solution providers have pressure to grow their offerings horizontally and start spreading to new things. Yes, totally. One example of this might be weights and biases expanding from experiment tracking to hyperparameter sweeps. Yes, again, especially because they just got that round of funding. Just curious if you have any thoughts on how to think about this kind of thing in build versus buy decisions.
Build versus buy decisions. I mean, what the? Sorry, I mean, maybe
so yeah,
I don't know what that means.
basically, like when you have a company and you buy them for one piece of the puzzle,
you buy
right?
decisions, or yeah.
And then they start to grow and they start to take up more of the space because they're getting pressure, probably outside pressure from investors, or they want to try and be like any company and make more money, make more sales, which is completely respectable. How do you look at that when you're analyzing the build versus buy decision?
I have a clear answer to this, honestly. So, because when you have, if I understand correctly, so when you pushed to grow and you push to deliver different tools, etc. Okay, I mean, I don't know why, but I have a company on my mind. It's Databricks. It has very nice product like Spark. I mean, it provides very nice cloud-based solution with Spark. But also, I don't know why, but it is pushed to deliver different other byproducts. And sometimes they are good, sometimes they are not good. So overall, I would say that when company is pushed to deliver something, then I guess they have good reason for this. But I beg them, like, please check offering, check quality, etc. Have closed loop communication loop with community, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Now, one thing that I'd like to know is about this idea of when to build and when to grab an open source tool. And if I understand correctly, what you all were doing was using a lot of, or you were basically building a lot of your own. And then you started to say, hey, it seems like the ecosystem is mature enough. Now we can use some open source tools. Is that how it worked? Or did you go from open source from the beginning and just try and build on top of that?
I will not say that we were waiting for open source to be mature enough. Because honestly, when I joined Adyen, we already had a very mature, very mature open source ecosystem. So I'm not fully aware about all the decisions which were made before before me, etc. But when to, I'm a huge fan of open source. I would say when you can, and when you don't have any legal, regulatory compliance restrictions, go with open source. And if you can, also return to open source, because just in that way we can have good open source products, good open source ecosystem.
And
I mean, yeah.
so why is that? That's an interesting one. And I know there are a lot of people that are very deep in open source or very big advocates of it. But I'd love to hear your take on why you feel you would rather have open source than either building your own or buying something.
Yeah, I mean, we can even buy open source. I mean, there is a big, there are big company which grew on open source. Let's say Databricks, Connect, like Kafka, Confluent. Sorry,
Yeah.
Connect, that's their product, like Confluent, DataStax, etc. I'm not, there is not advertisement, but I'm saying that there is companies which offer open source products like with support. But I would say always, if you can, if you don't have restrictions, always try to go with open source, just because there is open source is supported by huge number of people. Like and this number can be like 10 times, 100 times more than your team or your company. And they share just knowledge and experience in that product. So, and you cannot be smarter than them, or you can make very stupid mistake which will be spotted by some other person, like in the open source community.
Yeah. Do you feel like you need to have a certain maturity or a certain number of engineers to be able to do something like that, though?
About maturity, no, I wouldn't say that you need to wait 10 years and after that trying to commit to open source or to to resolve some bugs in your favorite open source tools. You don't need to wait, because some open source tools are thriving. I mean, they need to help even inexperienced help, like for fixing bugs in documentation or somewhere else, like and the second part of the question, I might forget, but you were asking if we need to give, why we need to give back. Yes.
Well, no, I was thinking more along the lines of a company that might not have the engineering resources. And so is it wise for a small startup that's trying to move fast to go with open source still, in your opinion, or should they just buy something?
I mean, that's pros and cons, but if I would say to go with open source, because you need to understand what you need to buy. So very simple examples, like with microservices or with the database. So with microservices, you don't need to start directly with microservices. You need to start with your monolith and to grow and to see what parts needs to be separated. The same with database. You don't need to start directly with the NoSQL or with a Hadoop cluster. I mean, start with small relational database, check patterns, check what tables are growing, etc. Outgrow your database, and etc. So for buying commercial supported products, you also need to have, not use case, but you need to outgrow some small open source products or some widely adopted products. But maybe it can save a lot of money. I guess. It can save a lot of money if you're buying, for example, some database from Oracle or whatever. But
everyone's
honestly,
favorite database provider. Everyone's favorite database provider. Oracle.
Like favorite. I mean, but honestly, you need for paying for something, you need to have use case for the tool, and basically you need to outgrow your own resources. And here I mean your own skills which you have in your company or in your team.
That's a great point. So let's talk about this process of you transitioning. And I know there was something that you mentioned to me, and it's like finding the correct process in the transition from and scaling up, right? And how to find that process, how to know when you're doing something right, when you're transitioning from homegrown or you're building on top of open source. And how can you tell what your true north is? Is it just by talking to the data scientists and making sure there's that feedback loop we talked about earlier? Or
Oh, yeah.
are there other ways?
No, there is no other way. So, but I mean, there is no other way. So you need to speak with data scientists. Why you need to speak? Because I mean, there is migration strategy. It has two names. I don't know why. It's called green-red or green-black, green strategy, etc. I mean, the whole idea of it, you have your old installation, which does something, and meantime, when it does something and you maintain it and maybe adding new features, you are building new installation. So this one old green and this one black or red. I mean, that doesn't matter. So I mean, there is slight difference between black and red. So and while you're building it, I mean, it is not short project. I mean, it can last for a year or 2 years, or I don't know, like for sure it will be lasting more than 2 weeks. So and while you're building, you need to communicate with your stakeholders, data scientists, like what features you need to migrate from old one to new one, and especially what does it mean for all your stakeholders and for you to have feature parity between old installation and new installations, because maybe some features or some use cases or some functionality will be slightly different, but it will be feature parity, something like this. And just after getting feature parity between two installations, you can have some official point in time when you switch off your old installation, etc. I mean, there are possible different ways how you're switching off old installation, because you need to make sure that new is working correctly, that it's producing same results, same data, etc. You need to compare it. So like all the ceremonies, but they just one thing which you need to assure first, that feature parity, that and that's you can achieve just by communication with data scientists or data analysts or whomever else. Like your team needs to have like closed loop, like you've rolled out new feature or some like technical or not technical, or did test that on new installation, on old installation, check that, yeah, that's okay, that's cool. And afterwards, yeah, you can be sure that everything is okay.
That, I think, is a brilliant point that you made about the feature priorities and how you need to know what to take with you and what to leave behind. And when you take it with you, it shouldn't just be this lift and shift. It should be an upgrade, right? I've heard people talk about how they don't believe in just lifting and shifting. They think that whenever you're going to actually migrate, you should migrate for the better. And it's
for sure. Even if like facade or like API or UI remains the same, but honestly, you need to invest a bit more resources into implementation, just to be sure that the next guy who comes after you will not say that it's special trees, just because of that.
Yeah. We've got a question coming through. And then I want to ask you about, so I'll ask this question and then later I'll ask you about some war stories, because I'm sure you have a lot of them and I'd love to hear what went wrong. That's always fun to talk about.
Yeah,
but let's hit this one first. How do you know if one of your models being served in production is working well or needs to be retrained? I guess this was because the monitoring piece. What are you using for monitoring? This is another huge part of the puzzle. So
Yeah.
how are you keeping tabs on these models?
Uh, Basically, a lot of dashboards. And also, we piggybacking on the monitoring infrastructure, which was built by our brilliant infrastructure engineers. I mean, it's super boring stuff, maybe for for most of you guys, but Prometheus, scrapping, and we just visualizations of metrics on dashboards in
And,
Grafana. Yeah.
and you find that to be good enough? Because this is one thing that I am fascinated about is if Prometheus and Grafana are good enough for the data space.
Mm,
And because you see a million tooling companies coming out right now, well, not a million, but there's a lot that are popping
yeah.
up like mushrooms that are
Uh,
specifically monitoring for data.
for I mean, here we're speaking not monitoring data, but we are speaking about monitoring our models on production, how they are served.
Yeah,
And
sorry. Did I say?
basically,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah,
Monitoring
and
models.
it's a bit different than monitoring data because when you're monitoring models and productions, basically you have couple metrics to monitor. Okay, not couple, but you have two different groups of monitoring. There's monitoring like web service itself and all the hardware metrics of server which we have, etc. So I guess that's super boring stuff because there is a lot of blog posts, etc. But basically, you scrapping with Prometheus, all the metrics, how does it perform, etc. Health checks, um, or even if you use some service discovery, for example, console, you can use this brilliant tool. Or I guess from Netflix we have Eureka, like service discovery tool, which already know if service is healthy and if it's running, etc. And second stuff which you need to monitor with your monitor of the model, that's how does it performs, like interference. Does it degrade or if it's not degrading? And till this moment, Grafana is still good for having, I mean, maybe it's lagging a bit, but to compare that interference of new model, it's better than old one, etc. It still can represent. So it becomes a bit messy when you want to describe or when you want to see huge number of services, like how does they perform, etc. in different data centers, in different machines, like even the same model, but which was deployed into different data centers. Like you already can have very clumsy like UI, etc. So yeah, but it still does its job.
And do you have automatic retriggering, retraining of models set up?
We're still working with it, so we just I mean. Let's clarify, because different people or different teams or different companies understand different stuff with automatic retriggering.
Mm-hmm.
So what can be an automatic retriggering? It can be just training the model. So and that's all. Or it can be training the model and deploying it to production.
Mm-hmm.
So training the model to make it automatically, it's kind of easy to do with state of the art or orchestration tool like Airflow, for example, because when you have DAC, which does this, you need just to release the code or release your DAC, etc. So, and it's already will be scheduled and it will be automatically retriggered. Even if you don't have when you don't have scheduled time for training, you still can trigger with Airflow API or Airflow CI automatically. But if you're speaking about deploying it to the production, I mean, our part of stuff still needs to be done. We still yet to discover how it should be done, and it's in our space. It's super interesting and super hard. I would say challenge because financial institutions, super regulated. We need to have different compliance. For example, different people, the same person cannot own entire deployment or entire infrastructure. So if I'm building something, I cannot own its deployment, etc. So, and that's which we need to obey. And there is numerous of different restrictions which we have. So we need, I guess, for us, it's still yet to be discovered, and we need to understand how to do it correctly. And because everyone wants like to have just one button, click it, and model in production, and is getting live traffic, etc. But unfortunately, no, there should be some some friction added.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that too. There is a lot of talk about that, and it still is not clear if that's the best way of going about it, right? Like, it is nice, like you say, everyone wants that, but as you're mentioning, especially in the financial space, you have regulations, and you can't just do that without keeping those regulations and these different laws in mind. So that is a very important point to keep in mind. Now,
and financial sphere is not super regulated if we compare even with healthcare. Yesterday I was speaking with a friend of mine from healthcare, and he has much worse situation because of explainability. I mean, just imagine if something goes wild with his model, which predicts like someone's health condition. I mean, it's much worse problem, and I wouldn't say that I'm super happy that I'm not in healthcare, but it's super nice problem and super big problem to tackle also.
Nice. So a quick question before you give us a war story from Jack. He's asking what kind of hardware you're using for the on-prem model training.
Hardware. For on-prem training, we don't have any special hardware, so I guess that's usual machines with the 32 cores or something like this. I don't remember how much RAM, but I guess around bigger than half tera. I don't remember. So I mean, that's usual machines. With the serving machines, it's a bit harder because serving machines, you need to understand that machine learning model prediction, that's CPU bound. So as there you need to have and you cannot serve more models than, you cannot serve more models than you have cores on your machine itself. So because everyone wants to have very fast interference, like request, scoring, response, request, response. So basically, you have CPU bound process. With RAM, also there is not so big. There is no constraints with RAM, like you need to have a lot of RAM, etc. Because you need just to have as much RAM as you have models, as total size of the models to be serialized and to be placed in RAM. So answering your question also about serving, you need to have a lot of cores.
Yeah. Now let's hear it, man. The moment everybody's been waiting for. Give us some of your war stories. Or horror stories even. What are some things that you've learned along the way to finish out this meetup?
Horror stories. It's not super horror story, but it's sharing of experience. Guys, don't do context switching, because with context switching, constant context switching, you can do mistakes. For example, removing data from the HDFS, skip trash, and afterwards checking what data you did remove. So don't do this. So, because from that stuff comes all your from context switching, and without focusing on some stuff which needs to be delivered, you are doing a lot of mistakes. Also, it's our internal joke, which I want to fix somehow, but I'm not allowed because because of some constraints. But be wise with naming of your products, guys, because we have router, which is not router but server, but it's called server, and we have gateway, which is not gateway but it's router. So be wise with your namings.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And so you have to automatically train your mind to think router is actually server and gateway, or gateway is server and router is not.
Yeah. Something like we already trained our minds, and but it is fun. So, like per se, our failures which we have, I even cannot recall them. Why? Because I wouldn't say that Adyen is that company which allows you to make a lot of mistakes, but you can make mistakes. So, and if you're making mistakes and you're not being punished for that, so you just okay, then I can improve myself. So, and that's why for the last 3 years, for sure, I did a lot of mistakes. Especially with migration and especially with communication, because I'm super optimistic person and like, oh, okay, now we can migrate, and afterwards we're migrating after, I don't know, like a couple months, etc. But that's part which I really like about Adyen, that you can make mistakes, it forgives, to some extent. If you
So you're
delete
not
everything.
totally scarred by these different mistakes that you've made. They've passed through your mind and you can't remember them now.
Yeah, and that's also examples that I did a lot of them.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and talk and go through this process and really talk a bit about everything. We bounced around a lot. So thanks everybody for joining us and coming along for the ride. But Igor, this is it, man. I really appreciate it. And for all of those that are listening, I didn't even put a link to our Slack, but if you want to check out the Slack, just go to mlops.community, or if you're listening in the future, then you can check the links below. And that's it. I will see you later. Thanks again, Igor.
Thank you, Demetrius. Thank you guys for listening. It was a very nice experience.
See y'all.
See you.